Alright, I'm going to try to read Zechsli, chapter 24 and maybe 25. Zach sat next to Sam, clutching the backpack in his lap and trying not to think about how much trouble he and his family were in because of his mistake. They would have to start all over again. A new city, a new house, new names. Joanne would not play Christine, his mother would not open the bookstore, and Zach might never see Catalin again. All of this is heartrending. The Basques have been taking refuge in the mountains for hundreds of years, Sam said. They were about 15 miles outside Elko, and this was the first thing he had said since they pulled away from the Nevada. And Sam glanced at the backpack in Zach's lap. I didn't tell my handler about your father's journal. I assume he's using it to make a deal. My dad's not making a deal. Zach's anger flared. He wants to get these guys as bad as anybody. I think the only reason he held it back is to make sure that we're safe. Take a deep breath, Zach, Sam said gently. All I'm saying is that I think it best to keep the journal to ourselves. We'll get it to him when all of this is over. Zach was surprised at the outburst. Sorry, and Sam held up his hand. You don't have to apologize for anything, as none of this is your fault. How can you say that? If I hadn't kept a journal and let Peter Short get his hands on it, we would be back at the Nevada sleeping. It wasn't the journal that brought the men to Elko, Sam said. They figured out the town you were in on their own. It was only a matter of time before they found out where you lived. Zach was still not convinced. Sounds like spy logic to me, Sam laughed. Well, you may be right, but we have to have our own way of looking at things. They drove a few more miles in silence, and then Sam said, I need to have you do something for me, Zach. Okay. If we get unlucky and run into these men, you have to promise me that you will follow my lead. What do you mean? I want you to try and stay calm. You can't think clearly if your mind is jumping all over the place. Second, I want you to do exactly as I say without a question. I've been in circumstances like this more times than I care to remember, and I used to be very good at it. What I'm asking is for you to trust me. Well, I trust you. Sam turned off the highway onto a dirt road. Catalin knocked lightly on Sam's door. When there was no answer, she tried Zach's door. Come in. She opened the door and stepped into the dark room. The light came on. Sitting on the bed was a man dressed in black. You must be Cat, he said. Peter had told him all about the Cristobal family. Peter takoi predatel, he's a traitor. Before she could react, someone came up behind her and put a hand over her mouth. Catalin struggled, but it was no use. The man holding her was too strong. The man on the bed took a knife out of his pocket and flipped open the blade. Where is Zach? He asked quietly. The man holding her took his hand away. I don't know, Catalin cried hoarsely. There was a knock at the door, and the man holding her clamped his hand back over her mouth. Zach, it is Benat. Is everything all right? I thought you and Unai were going to the sheep camp. The man on the bed smiled and said, Bring the girl to me and open the door. The man holding Catalin pushed her toward the bed. Ander was standing outside the tent with a flashlight when Sam and Zach drove up. Sam walked over and explained the situation to Ander in Basque. How long will we stay up here? Zach asked Sam. I don't know. I'll drive down to the highway late tomorrow morning and check in at the Nevada to see if your handlers have arrived. They went into the tent where it was warm, and Ander gave Zach a loaf of bread and set a wheel of cheese down on the table in front of him. Zach was not interested in eating. He listened to Ander and Sam talk in Basque for a while, then went over to one of the cots and lay down. It's not a bad idea, Sam said. We should try all to get some sleep. I have some sleeping bags in the back of the truck. He came back into the tent a moment later, carrying 2 bags, and tossed one to Zack. "I'll sleep on the floor," Zack said. "There are only 2 cots." "Suits me," Sam said, and unrolled his bag on the second cot. When everyone was settled and Ender turned off the Coleman lantern, Zack was exhausted, but he couldn't sleep. His mind replayed his mistakes over and over again. He was worried about his mother and sister. Were they okay? How long would it take the U.S. Marshals to find them in L.A.? He thought about Cataline. He missed her already. How would he feel if he had to move away and never see her again? He listened to the men's breathing inside the tent. They seemed to have no trouble finding sleep. Unai, the shepherd. With all the other things that had happened, the news that the Elko Middle School custodian was a former Russian spy and defector seemed almost like a dream. He wondered if Sam had offered to build his mother's bookstore and have him clean out the building so he could keep a closer eye on the Grangers. Zack closed his eyes and listened to the sheep on the hillside, and after a while he fell into a fitful sleep. "Unai!" Bennett shouted from outside the tent. Zack sat up. Sam was already on his feet. 2 flashlight beams danced along the outside walls of the canvas tent like giant fireflies. "They have Cataline," Bennett said from outside. "I am sorry, but they want the boy in exchange for her." "Send the boy out to me." Zack recognized the voice, and he had heard it in his dreams many times. "It's him," he said. "Who?" Sam asked. "One of the men who came to our house." "Listen to me very carefully," the man said. "No harm will come to the girl or the old man if you do as we say." "What do you want?" Sam asked. "I want you to turn a light on in the tent. I will come inside and we will discuss it. No heroics, please. Your friends will pay for any problem that you cause." Sam whispered to Zack, "Stay calm, follow my lead, and remember the number 8. "What are you talking about?" "You'll understand when the time comes." Under lit the Coleman lantern. "Come on in," Sam said. The flap opened and Bennett was pushed inside, followed by a man with a ponytail holding an automatic pistol. Zack recognized him immediately from his father's sketch, and he realized this was not the first time he had seen him. It was the same man who he had seen in the balcony during his sister's audition, Alonzo Aznar. Bennett looked like he wanted to maul Alonzo. Ender put his hands on his shoulder and shook his head. Bennett sat down on the cot and clamped his hands between his knees, as if that were the only way he could stop them from tearing Alonzo apart. "Where's Cataline?" Sam asked. "Outside," Alonzo said. "We have done her no harm to her." He looked at Zack. "So we meet again, Jack." Zack said nothing. "What do you want?" Sam asked. "Jack knows what I want," Alonzo said calmly. Zack glanced at the backpack lying near the cot. Inside the backpack was the key to his father's cell. Outside the tent was an innocent girl who had nothing to do with this. He knew what she was going through, the confusion, the fear, and all because of him. "You'll let Cataline go?" Zack asked. "Of course," Alonzo said easily. "I have no quarrel with these people." Zack looked at Sam. "Let the girl go first," Sam said. Alonzo cocked the pistol and pointed it at Sam's chest. "You are in no position to bargain." Sam didn't appear at all concerned by the gun. In fact, he seemed somewhat amused by it, as if Alonzo were pointing nothing more dangerous than his index finger. "Let Cataline go, and we will give you what you want." The 2 men stared at each other for a long time in the dim light. "Very well," Alonzo finally said, and then shouted for Cataline to be brought inside. The car door opened, and a few moments later Cataline was pushed through the tent flap, followed by Paul, who was also carrying a pistol. Cataline stepped over to Bennett and threw her arms around him. "We have fulfilled our part of the bargain," Alonzo said, "and now give me the journal." Sam looked at Zack and nodded. Zach picked up his backpack and handed it to Alonzo. Alonzo opened the pack and took out a stack of opera magazines. Alonzo took a step toward Zach. "What is this? Where's the journal?" Zach was as surprised by the opera magazines as Alonzo was. "He doesn't know," Sam said. "I put the magazines in there." Alonzo pointed his pistol at Catalin. "Too bad." Benat pushed Catalin behind him. "If you kill anyone in this tent," Sam told him quietly, "you will never get the journal, and I guarantee you that it will find its way to the police." Sam's already got him. "Who are you?" Alonzo asked. "I'm a school custodian." Alonzo scoffed. "You don't act like a custodian." Once again, the two men stared at each other. The silence was broken by Alonzo. "We're wasting time, Mr. Custodian." "I agree," Sam said. "Let's you and me and your friend drive back to Elko and get the journal. The boy will come with us." "No," Sam said. "I'll go." Zach wasn't about to let Sam go off with these men alone. It's not necessary, Zach." "On the contrary, Mr. Custodian." Alonzo leveled his pistol at Zach's head. "I insist." These guys are no match to a former Russian KGB, former Russian spy. Nah, guy's too smart. It's like chess. He's already won the chess game. They don't even know it. So that's just what I think. Let's go one more chapter. 25. As they left the tent, Catalin covered her face and began sobbing. Sam told her not to worry, that everything would be fine, and Zach wished he had just a little of Sam's confidence. Outside, Alonzo turned to Paul. "Did you disable their truck?" "They aren't going anywhere unless they walk. I also opened the corral and scattered the horses." "Very good. After you, gentlemen." They rode down the Ruby Mountains in complete silence. Zach was in the front seat with Paul, Sam in the back seat with Alonzo. Zach spent his time trying to figure out why Sam wanted him to remember the number 8. After his initial surprise at the men showing up at the camp, Sam had been as calm as Zach had ever seen him. It was almost as if Sam were the one in control, not Alonzo. He must have devised a way to get out of this, but Zach had no idea what it might be. When they got to Elko, Alonzo asked Sam where to go. "Elko Middle School," Sam asked. "The journal's in my workshop." Paul parked in front of the school. "You stay with the boy," Alonzo said. "I will go inside with the custodian to get the journal." "No," Sam insisted. "Zach stays with me, or you're not getting the journal." After some thought, Alonzo relented. "Very well, we will all go inside. But I am warning you, if you try anything, the boy will be killed." Sam nodded. "I understand." They got out of the car and walked up the stairs to the school. Sam unhooked the rings of keys on his belt and found the right one for the front door. "Is there an alarm?" Alonzo asked. "Yes." "And do you know the code to turn it off?" "Of course." "I hope so, because if the alarm goes off, silent or otherwise, and the police come here, Zach will—" "We understand," Sam interrupted. "You'll get your journal, and we won't spring any traps on you." Zach looked at Sam. "Spies are very good at setting traps." Sam was trying to tell him something. He led them down the hallway and opened the office door. Inside, near the receptionist's desk, was a keypad with a red blinking light. Alonzo shone his flashlight on it, and Sam quickly entered the code. The light turned to green. "We're all set." "Keep a hold of the boy," Alonzo said to Paul, taking a position a few feet behind Sam. Paul grabbed Zach's arm, and they followed Alonzo and Sam down the dark hallway. Alonzo and Paul's cowboy boots clacked eerily on the old linoleum as they made their way to the auditorium. Zach was still surprised at how calm Sam appeared. He acted as if he were escorting a couple of teachers to the auditorium, not two men holding guns. Zach was anything but calm. His hand had got numb from Paul's pinching his bicep so tightly. His legs felt like mud, and his heart was slamming in his chest like a wild bird trapped in a cage. He was certain that Alonzo was going to kill them as soon as he had the journal. He remembered exactly what Alonzo had said to his mother before he left their home that night. "We are very serious men. If you call the police or tell anyone about what happened this evening, we will come back and kill you and your children." They had gone to the police. They'd broken his trust. Zach had told Sam all of this at the Nevada, but he didn't think Sam understood how dangerous Alonzo was. Sam pulled open the door of the pitch-black auditorium. Alonzo shone his flashlight around the inside, which did little to illuminate the dark cavern. "Are there windows?" he asked. "No," Sam said. "Then turn on all the lights." "No problem." Sam stepped inside and opened a small metal panel built into the wall. He switched on the lights one by one, including the house lights. Zach looked at the stage and noticed that several of the props had been moved since he was last there. The punching bag had been dragged to the center of the stage. Alonzo turned his flashlight off and carefully scanned the auditorium. When he was satisfied that there was no one waiting in the shadows for him, he turned to Sam. "Where is your room?" "Beneath the stage." They walked down the center aisle to the small door near the stage, which was only wide enough for them to pass through one at a time. When they reached the end of the short corridor, Sam unlocked his door and turned on the workroom light. Zach looked around. Sam had dragged his recliner to the center of the large room. On the seat was his jack-in-the-box. "Where's the journal?" Alonzo asked. "I'll get it," Sam said, and started toward the recliner. Zach stared at the box in surprise. There was something different about it. "Stop," Alonzo ordered. Sam did as he was told. "I will get the journal." Alonzo looked at Paul. "Cover them." Paul pushed Zach against the workbench and waved Sam over with his gun. "You'll need a key," Sam said as he unclipped the key holder from his belt. Zach suddenly realized what was different about the box. The padlock had a big red 8 on it. Sam had set a trap. Above the door on the ceiling was something heavy. He had created an upside-down jack-in-the-box. Real spies use anticipation, guile, and deceit. Spies also have a sense of humor, Zach thought, forcing himself not to look up at the ceiling and give the trap away. Sam took his time going through the keys. "Hurry up," Alonzo said. "Sorry, they all look alike." Zach knew that Sam was giving him time to figure out how to spring the trap. He turned his head and looked at the levers above the bench and casually put his hand on the bench beneath the row of levers. "Here it is," Sam said, taking it off the ring. Alonzo stepped over him and took the key. "The journal had better be inside." "You have my word." Sam glanced over at Zach. "I'm sorry about this, Zach. I know you wanted to keep the journal for your dad, but sometimes things just don't work out as we anticipate." "That's okay," Zach said. "You would have to time the pull perfectly." Alonzo walked over to the recliner and looked down at the box. He opened the lock and took it out of the hasp. He opened the box. "What is this?" Alonzo shouted in rage. He reached into the box and came out with Commander If in his hand. Zach pulled the lever. The punching bag crashed down on Alonzo. At the same moment, Sam grabbed Paul's arm and swung him against the wall. A shot went off and splintered the ceiling. Sam slammed Paul's gun hand against the workbench and the pistol went skidding across the floor. Zach dove for it. By the time he got back to his feet, Sam had Paul under control. "We need to tie him up," he said. Zach found just the thing for the job. He found a roll of duct tape and proceeded to bind Paul's hands and feet. When he was finished, he walked over to the unconscious Alonzo Aznar. Commander If was lying next to him. Zach put his imaginary friend in his pocket and walked away. Uncle Don arrived at the school accompanied by several U.S. Marshals. Alonzo was conscious now and tied up like Paul with duct tape. Uncle Don walked over to him and read him his rights, and then joined Zach and Sam, who were sitting on the workbench. "Hello, Zach." "I slept up," Zach said. "I know. We found a kid named Peter Short on Alonzo's jet. He told us all about it. We also found Alonzo's other man and his new pilot. They're in custody." "What about my mom and sister?" "We found them too. Doris is on her way to Los Angeles. They're fine, but not too happy about all of this." "What's going to happen now?" "Well, it looks like the Grangers are moving out of Elko immediately." "But we have Alonzo." Zach felt his hope slipping away. "I see that," Uncle Don said, "but unfortunately he can still get to you from jail. Money has a long reach. I'm taking you out of here. We're going to meet your mom and sister and start this all over again." Zach knew Uncle Don was right. This would never be over. "The kid in the airplane said something about a journal belonging to your father. Do you know anything about that?" Zach shook his head. "Nope." Uncle Don stared at him for a moment. "Well, the kid wasn't making much sense. He was pretty scared." Zach glanced down into his shirt pocket. "You're getting better at this," Commander If said. Zach smiled. "Before we go, I want to talk to Sam alone." "Go ahead, but make it quick. I have an airplane waiting for us at the airport. Your mom and sister are already en route." Zach knew better than to ask where they were heading. He and Sam walked up to the stage and sat on the piano bench. He spent a few moments watching the men and women moving around the workshop through the trap doors. "Thanks, Sam." "Well, to tell you the truth, Zach, it was kind of fun. It reminded me of the old days." "Will you tell Cataline what happened? She deserves an explanation." "I'll tell her." "And what about the journal?" "It's safe," Sam assured him. "I can give it to you before you go, but it might be best to let me get it to your dad." "How?" "It's better that you don't know. Spies have their own way of doing things." Zach nodded. He knew Sam would get the journal to his father. "You're in as much trouble as I am now. Alonzo's not going to forget what you did. I bet they would put you into the protection program if you asked." Sam shook his head. "I spent most of my life pretending to be someone I wasn't. Besides, I have an opera to put on. No, I'm going to stay right here. If Alonzo comes after me, I think I have enough guile left in me to deal with the situation." He put his arm around Zach's shoulders. "A shepherd always stays with his flock." Amazing chapter.